Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reporters for the 18th of January, and well, it was just quite an interesting near end of the week setup as we go into the Friday. The market is still live right now, just closed regular session, but there's still the after hours and futures. From our 2600 that we dipped right back to, came right back above it, and again, there really wasn't anything in between this range between 2600 even to 2635, and well, that's exactly where we shot above and came right back to slightly above the 61% Morganacci line that we have here, but quite powerful. We're still in this same continuation of the rising red from a shakeout standpoint, and the yellow staying right with it and above. From a red standpoint, we've just kind of been slightly flat. This created a tiny little upsurge, but we also saw midterm buyers finally get engaged, which is interesting at this point in the month to see that some people said it was all the activity of China sanctions being removed. It's possible. Look at the intraday. It was quite interesting because things were really soft, but they started to build, and then they kind of stayed flat for a while, and then boom, we had this massive explosion. It was quite neat, but it got all positive extremes that ended up filling. So NQ, right about the same. You can see with the ABM continuing to fall, the ABM now right underneath where the NASDAQ was. So literally a return back to 50% would pretty much negate where that trade is going, though I think that still, given the weaker signal, I would be up near there with the tighter stop, simply because with this kind of situation, euro fading still, this definitely puts some pressure on it, but I think the relief of trade sanction situation certainly means that the trade war concept is going away. It certainly hasn't impacted the trade deficit or anything like that. The numbers are still a record, blah, 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 blah. So, and then the gold, just hovering across there. We have not seen any change or breakdown from this shakeout magenta or anything. We might see the yellow dip below there. That would be interesting from that standpoint, that we might see a little bit more softness when you're getting closer with cyan under red. Still hasn't crossed anything or done anything significant to warrant, I guess you would say, any major excitement one way or another. All right, so here we are at the 5K chart. So from the other day, short signal, that continued to follow, and it broke down below the 26. And I was posting about this, that I was getting the buy signals, and I'll show it on the other chart in a second once we go through this one real fast. And I covered on a turnaround as I was following the buy entry lower and lower, and for me, once I get to the 26, I sort of stopped there, and boom, it came around, filled me, and it was right over here. And then we started that slow move. So we broke this previous pivot of the red, which said, okay, hey, even though I'm getting flat price read, I'm still accelerating on that move. And then it continued, and boom, it was nice. And then we just traded across with some positive extremes, but they kept filling within some weak signals. But as it was just going across, we just really pretty much the whole day stayed with cyan below red. We ended up with a couple of pops as we were getting close to a negative shakeout, but it just didn't produce much of anything. And then this is where I was talking about, we had this positive extreme with the brief little pop down, but we really weren't even getting a strong short signal. And it was interesting because most of the day we were getting strong spikes in the algo activity, even though we were in this long configuration. The problem with attempting to short any of this is you really want to see that steel come above cyan and then close below, or you've got to dip below that zero line. Now here what happened, the zero line, yes, and then immediately, boom, you get the spike of the steel right back above it to, and then a drop of orange, which closed it right off immediately, and that's what created the new little high. It still retraced, and then boom, we ended up the start of the run right there with the cyan under red again. And I know some people, but it's a brand new high, how can I take? You got to go with it, and it was right at a previous algo that we had here from an old setup 26 there, and then also at the 2643 we had algo line. Coincidence that we stopped literally right on that target. So all these positive extremes start coming in there, and I'm looking at this one thinking, hey, that's the strongest setup we've had, but look at this, we're above 13.5 with the red. Well, I know that isn't going to last. So from my standpoint, I was like, hey, 26.43, I'll go. It's very attractive at that particular spot, and you can sort of wait for that first dip back below the 13.5, and then you need to see the continuation move of it. At least your range is so narrow there, and once it broke the ABM yellow, you're like, well, okay, and then it just fights back and forth, and then boom, the precipitous drop, and you start filling them. It's like, okay, the next thing I'm looking at is 26.28, which just a fraction above this last positive extreme right over here, and boom, filled that, and then it traded across, and again, just taking that lower pivot right there, matter of following. We came right up to it after putting in the buy configuration right in here, so I was expecting a little bit of a pop from it, and the pop happened at the same time the red was fading, so it was sort of like, ooh, that may not survive all that well, and sure enough, the positive extreme, and it filled it back in, but it was still rising, and it had passed well above at that particular point. And then we ended up with this last little run right as we headed into post-market. So stayed pretty consistently right over there, because what you would do after you have the high one that breaks below that one, you also have this lower pivot. So we've actually made higher lower pivots, which created the P3 right here at the 50%, which is slightly higher than before, and then boom, has led to just, and these are still significant enough moves when you look at the numerics of it. Because from the 50%, let's see if it actually will put up my chart instead of just giving me a white dot. There we go. 50%, 33, and it shot all the way up to this just most recent high of 39. I mean, it's still a 6-point move. It's still pretty darn decent. And then it started to fade back there because the steel rejected with orange rising, and a little bit of the rollover, and that's where we're right back at the 50% right now here in the post-market. And yes, it's equivalently a short snake, but you can already see the steel moving below the from below the red here, about to cross over. They made some dramatically lower shakeout readings with this. One's actually higher with pretty much even price, so it's a little bit divergent. If we look at it from the adjusted paint bar setup, you get that P2 coming in right there with the X's indicating that we've broken past that previous resistance line, and that produced that nice little pop there. Here it was from a DOC standpoint where you broke below, and boom, DOC spread in full, right from the ABM yellow, happens a lot, and then boom, broke down from there. If we scroll back a little bit, it stays pretty much green, but again, it puts in a couple of these BK items, but it's putting them in where you're pretty much not seeing any strength to a short because you're falling orange in this setup. By the time we get over to this one, the same problem. You don't have steel coming up to cross over. This was the closest opportunity right here. You still have red above the zero, so you really couldn't expect anything but a dip back to the ABM yellow. So is it really worth the risk to reward at that point? I don't think so when you're riding from that construct. And then boom, you can see where that breakout took place from there. But it was a nice turnaround play from that original excuse me, I want to go back to that the open part. So here's what I was talking about from that open. So we had this falling, the signal came in here. I was looking for green to be over cyan when that kind of comes through, especially on the turnaround of the orange. I really want to see that crossover to overtake the orange because the orange can still produce some negative. That's why I was allowing that to continue to trail. Of course, we had that 26 algo level. So by the time it dipped down below, we were like right over here. I had then moved to the low of this bar, which was right at the algo, and then it came right back up and filled me. And so even though it danced above to the 23 and then came back and even dipped it down below on me, but I was fine with it because of having that low entry. I've got a pretty reasonable stop stop range of, it was barely over 6 points because there was only 4 points to the low, and still had plenty of play with that. And then sure enough, produces another signal. Same configuration. This time though, you do have the green above, so this one was a lot better, even though it still produced a little bit of a drawdown right back to the 26. This is about 4 or so points if we go ahead and look at what the actual reading was on it. Okay. Trying to move it. Let's see if I can get it to give me the data window there properly. Okay, there. So 2605, and literally dips down to the 26, so right about the 5 points. But from where I was already at the 26, it was just literally giving up that, which it's always hard to do, but sometimes that happens with longs, and this is where the ABM sometimes will rise a little too fast for this kind of setup where you get the initial pump, a 50% retrace. Oftentimes I'll take gain on part of mine there and look to these if I've got reasonable signal. I wasn't particularly thrilled with that until we dipped back down with the orange, which came in right here as we were about to start popping the next run, and even produced another buy right here just before the 50 with the P2s. The X's just indicate that we moved past again another pivot of the DOC red, and that led to a nice move. Also coincidentally was a gold, because you can see the gold shakeout rising, so that right about the 50, usually you're expecting that 100%. And then from that 100%, like I said, we followed most of that throughout the day, and that was pretty consistent. So no real new signals from that, but it just showed that the same ones producing the same effect over and over again. It was pretty strong from a DOC standpoint to stay above red with over cyan for the most part until we ended up right here with that short configuration. And this is what we got going on in post-market action. The initial weakness right here with red below zero. You actually end up right there with this cyan starting to tip up at the same time. Steel's about to cross the minus 359 to 395. This is one of those where it's like, okay, I'm at the 61. Is it better to take the 61 and then look for my next zone? That tends to be the best opportunity from that standpoint. But still with the rising shakeout in general, but it had started to make lower histogram readings there. You didn't have a crossover yet of the yellow, but that's actually happening at this particular point right now. And with much weaker readings, it's interesting, but again, if you really expect this short to go, you're going to need to see this red level broken. At this particular point, you're really pretty much matching the same highs, which is pretty consistent because price is pretty much matching with it at that particular, so you don't have any divergence. In fact, you're slightly higher with your overall shakeout, so this is still pretty convergent from a long standpoint. I wouldn't expect a whole lot yet. Short-wise development, but we're at this key algo level from a daily standpoint, and I think it's worth noting because pretty consistent that we stayed right in line with those, and you can see the amount of upside trade compared to what a lot of people expected coming off this. We've now returned 50% overall back to it. This is why you heard a lot of people talk about, well, this 2635 to 2650 range, but there's really nothing at the 2650 range now until you get up all the way to 27. So if you continue to get algo buying, as was suggested that they would have to roll over some of the shorts, then we would expect to break into much stronger shakeout. We're now above 1.9. I don't know if the daily, let's see if we take a look at that, because that daily had bought from the MBI, yeah, that's what I thought. It was about to get to the target range. We talked about this a few days back, 25.69.75, and the closeout here. Off your screen, let me slide it over so you can see what that actually looks like. Give it a second. Put it over. So nice series of trades off the larger ATR. I call it the ATR bust, but that was just because it's an expanded ATR and you're looking for that change in imbalance. So it took out at 26.26 from 25.60, and it's just under the 100 points, and I think that should give us all-time new equity highs on the MBI Opus. Yay! Super excitement there. Alright, so if we look at our performance graph, there it is. Brand new after, well, continuation here every few, and this has been an interesting one because this is all starting where the Fed began to really have an impact in our trade, where we weren't getting as much chop up and down. We started to return to that, and it's making an improvement. That's why we've been winning these last series, because the market is sort of normalized here, and that's giving us these up and down swings that the MBI Opus looks for. It was very consistent as it was happening from 2009 was phenomenal for that, and then even after that in the 12 and that, we didn't start getting it until the Fed really got active in 2012. Right in this area, that's when things started to get crazy, because we ended up with long runs, and it would take the trade, it's looking for a specific profit target, and it wasn't getting any extra entries from there. So that's good stuff, I think, for the year so far to start. It's doing pretty good trade-wise. I think we're well over the 74% since the beginning of the year. 3 trades, 100% profitable. So not bad start to the year for the MBI Opus from that standpoint. So pretty good stuff. As always, though, I will continue to update the relevant charts and keep you active on any new setups that happen to come underway. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.